Hi everybody, welcome back to Mando Lessons. My name is Baron Collins Hill. This is Improvisation Part 4. It's a series I've been doing. If you haven't watched the other ones, definitely check them out. They're all available on my website, mandolessons.com, as well as my YouTube channel, which you're probably on right now. In any case, this is Part 4. Check the other ones out. In the last lesson, Episode 3, I was talking about target notes, and we were working on when you have a chord progression like G, then C, then D, then back to G. The target notes that we were working with is to always hit the note name that is the chord name. So when it's a G, the first note you play when that G happens is going to be a G. And then you can do whatever you want. And then it gets to the C chord, and the idea was to hit that C note to start that C chord. And then the same thing with D. And then same thing back to G. Now, there's other target notes besides just the root of the chord. I'm going to talk a little music theory just for a second about how to build a chord. I don't want music theory to dictate too much of kind of our talk on improvisation, but I think it is important to some extent. So with a chord, the way you build a chord is to take the scale. So in this case, we're in the key of G, and so what notes make up a G chord? It's going to be the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. So G, A, B, C, D, G, B, D. That wasn't actually singing the right pitches, but G, B, D, G, B, D. So you find all these G's, B's, and D's and set them out, and you have G, D, B, G, and that's your classic G chord that you've probably already played for a long time. And now you can do the same thing with C. So we're in the key of G, but we want to use a C chord. So we're going to be taking C, you start on C, using the notes of a G scale, C, D, E, F sharp, G, C, E, G, C, E, G. And so we have C's, E's, and G's, and those are great notes to use as target notes. Same thing with D, we have D, E, F sharp, G, A. D, F sharp, A is how you build a D major chord, and those can be great target notes. So now we've just tripled the number of target notes that we have for any given key. So now we're going to jump into some exercises where we use those target notes just in the same way we were practicing in part 1, but now I'm going to lead you through different target notes based on different kind of scale degrees and chord tones. So here we go, let's dive into it. So we've got our chord progression, G, then C, then D, then back to G. And our chord tones, let's start out with the root and go through that once, and then we're going to do the thirds, and then we're going to do the fifths. So always hitting the root tone of the chord is going to sound like this. We got G, some kind of improvisation, C, D, G. Let's do that again, starting on G, C, then some kind of notes, D, then G. That's what we're doing in lesson 3. Now we're gonna kind of stretch that rubber band a little bit and try to widen our improvisation palette, if you will. And so now our target notes are always gonna be the third note of that chord. So in G, that's G, A, B. So our target note for a G chord is now B. A target note for our C, C, D, E, is an E. And the target note for our D chord, D, E, F sharp. So our target notes are now B for G, E for C, and F sharp for D. So that can sound something like this. Start with the chords, and we'll pass it back and forth a little bit. You start with the chords, I'll play the melody or I'll play the target notes, I should say, just to prove my point, and then we'll pass it back and forth a little more musically. So starting with G, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. it's just straight target notes. And now I'll make it a little more improvisatory. Now you take it. B is your target note, then E, and hit that F sharp, and back to B. Again, B, E, F sharp, and back to G. Do it again. You're on your own. All right, now our next exercise is we're going to use the fifth note of that scale and the sort of the highest note in our chord triads to use those as target notes. So the key of G, we have G, A, B, C, D. So our target note for a G chord is D. In C, we have C, D, E, F sharp, G. G is our target note for C, and D, E, F sharp, G, A. A is our target note for D. Again, our target note for G is D. Target note for C is G. Target note for D is A. So, I'll start out again by just playing those target notes. You play the chords, and then we'll pass it back and forth. So 1, 2, start with the G, and I'm playing D. You go to C, and I'm playing a G. You go to D, and I'm playing an A. This sounds pretty good. Back to G, and I'm playing a D. Here we go again. And if you take it, G, play a D note. You play a G, you play a D, sorry, an A, you play a D. You're on your own, D. One more. All right, so that's definitely a little bit kind of mathematical and music theory based. That said, the more you practice that, the more those target tones and those nice chord tones are really going to stick in your head. You'll notice you can start to kind of have descriptive words for them, or maybe even just kind of feelings about kind of what the different chord tones and target notes sound like. Like, I think for me, you know, if I'm playing in G and I hit that G target note, that's really, it's a really strong note. It sounds great, and it's always going to sound good, but it can be a little kind of basic and boring. And then if you are always hitting your thirds, so like your B, that is a little more kind of full and juicy sounding, because you're really, you know, the fact that a chord can be major or minor, and you're hitting that major third, which is what kind of makes a chord major or minor, is the third note in the scale. And by really kind of hitting all of those thirds in those chords, you're really kind of you're communicating that you know what the chord is, and you have this nice kind of understanding of what's going on, and you can really hit the right note at the right time. But it also feels a little less kind of secure, and it doesn't kind of resolve in the same way that kind of hitting the bass note is. So often, like, especially when you get to the end of that progression, and you end on a third, it doesn't quite have the same sort of like, ta-da, we're done, as going, which is the 1. So often it makes sense to end your solo on the 1 because it's very final. Same thing with the 5, is it's going to sound good. It's a nice kind of color. It's a little more kind of sleek to my ears. Again, you got to make up your own sort of definitions to all this stuff. It's not quite as juicy. It's a little more open sounding than the 3rd, but it still doesn't have the sort of the basic final kind of strength as the root, which just gives it a little more time. Like if you're playing that 5th, you're sort of communicating, hey, I'm still working on something. I'm not trying to sum up my solo right now. It can really give you a little bit more language to work with. So you can think about these as very, mathematical and music theory based problems to work through in your brain. But the more you do it, the more it will just become second nature. A lot of people, even before they have the faintest idea of music theory, will already be using their ears and finding these target notes, just because they often are the best sounding notes and they're very natural in a lot of ways. So, combine sort of your technical knowledge and your theory knowledge with just sort of that muscle memory and just trusting your own ears to figure out what sounds best to you. I'm going to leave it there. Thanks so much. I got lots more lessons on improvisation coming up in the future, so subscribe if you haven't already. All my lessons are always free, but there's a couple ways to donate if that is of interest to you. Not required, but greatly appreciated. Check out all the links in the description, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.